Hey, what's up, comrades? All right, so moving on. We're now in the Proteus arc, which begins with on Moira Island with Moira and Phoenix slash Jean Grey doing some tests on her capabilities. And there's some concern for Moira. Jean is demonstrating godlike powers. And in the shadows, we see that sketchy looking like boatman who came here a while ago and definitely got possessed because he's talking about how he hungers for humans. Jean then recounts like the last little bit where they fought Magneto, she got defeated, everyone got killed and destroyed, and then she went on like a trip all over the world. Meanwhile, back at the X-Mansion, the X-Men are practicing in the Danger Room, and then again Cyclops is putting them through the ringer, and they're getting turned up and failing. Cyclops gets a little mad. Colossus calls Wolverine little comrade, just delightful, and then Wolverine goes off to get drunk. Him and Cyclops and Aurora have a little bit of a talk, and then we go up to Asteroid M. Magneto's sitting around with like some sort of weird cane, like viewing his memories on some sort of reel-to-reel tape when a picture of Magna comes up, and he's like, oh, I gotta erase that. And then he thinks more about that. Further off, oh wait, no, not at this point. At this point, we go back to Scotland, and we see Jason Wynegard, and he's thinking about all the people he pretended to be, like the priest on a plane for Jean, the handsome Nikolai, whatever, in Greece and stuff, and how he's manipulating Jean slowly into becoming the Black Queen so that he can take over the Hellfire Club. While he's thinking about this, Jean has she has a memory pause, and Laura like wakes her up from it and says, hey, you okay? You zoned out there for a minute. Jean's like, yeah, I'm fine, watch this. And she like does like a 5 outfit change, and Lorna claps for her and whatnot. Meanwhile, this episode's all over the place. Moira is very concerned about Jean's powers and thinking about how, like, if she continues to have this power, she has the powers of a god. Out in the Shi'ar Empire, Professor Xavier, who's one of the smartest people on Earth, is getting treated like he's an idiot, like a big dummy, and he's sad about it. And he's just thinking about Jean and everything that occurred, and then he's like, shoot, Moira can't handle this on her own. I got to get back and help the X-Men. Back down to Moira, she's walking around the lab and notices that the chamber holding Mutant X has been opened and that he is no longer in there. Outside, Jean is chatting with Jamie and Alex, and she's just wandering around, and she hears Moira call for help, so she flies off to help her, and then all of a sudden she's in like some Victorian era like pink dress, and she's like, what? Who am I? Where am I? And then she gets jumped by the pirate guy, and she's like, oh my goodness, and she screams. Jamie and Alex hear it, and they head in to help out. Meanwhile, back at the X-Mansion, everyone's in the Danger Room except Nightcrawler, and he hears Beast enter the house, and he jumps at him. He's like, oh, Beast, what? You're still alive? And so he goes and gets everybody, and they come out, and Cyclops is like, oh my gosh, you're alive? And then they all talk about how Jean's still alive, and everyone escaped, and everyone's doing well and everything, and they're like, we gotta get the Blackbird and go now. And the Beast is like, you guys wait here, I'll be right back. I gotta go drop off the Quinjet for the, because he's an Avenger now. Cyclops calls Moira Island to let them know, and Jamie has made a bunch of doubles of himself, and Alex and Lorna are searching around to find out Moira and Jean, which they can't find. And Lorna answers the phone and tells them, and she's like, oh, you're alive? And he's like, yeah, we're coming out to see you guys. And she's like, hurry up, there's an alarm, we can't find Jean and Moira. And then she screams, and there's a voice that says, human, I need you. And Cyclops is like, oh no, we gotta go now. On the note of Professor X being a real dum-dum, the B-plot for this is excellent. It's Professor X playing some sort of bizarre chess game when this guy introduces his son, his little kid, and he's like, would you like to play chess with my child? And Xavier gets like super angry about it, and they're like, ooh, it's getting chilly in here, these humans. Anyway, so he goes to talk to Lilandria about it, and she's like, hey, we have the most enlightened, intelligent, powerful races in the whole universe here on the throne world. Maybe as the only human here, you should, I don't know, stop being such an asshole. He's like, I don't wanna. Then this lady walks by, and she's like, what up, homies? And Lilandra's like, oh, hey, what are you going? And she's like, I'm going to go fix this Spriggan on the other side of the desert. And they're like, hey, how about you go with him, Charles? And the lady's like, yeah, come with me. It'll be awesome. And Charles is like, murr. So anyway, so they start going across the desert, and this lady's just like chatting him up. And she's like, oh, we forgot to hook up the oxygen tank. Oh, well, I guess we're going to have to just keep going. Oh, who gives a fuck? And Charles is like, oh, man, this is not good. I can't breathe. And then the lady's like, oh, look, there's a meteor shower. Let's go. And eventually they get to like the Spriggan. And she's like, look, we found it. And he's like, we need air. And she's like, whatever, just look up. And he's like, I don't wanna. What a bitch. So then he does, and then his face goes from like angry to like, oh, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful meteor shower. And she's like, that was incredible. And then, this Sprigget has like an air pump, so they're able to get some oxygen. And then he keeps being like, "You're not actually a plumber, are you?" And she's like, "Yeah, of course I'm a plumber. Being a plumber is awesome." And he's like, "You're so wise and smart." Anyway, so they have a chit chat, and he finally decides he's gonna, act good and represent the human race well and not be such a jackass. And so he goes and finds that kid who was going to challenge him before, and then he challenges him to chess. And the laundry comes over and gives him a kiss on the cheeksies. And he's like, "Who was that girl?" And the laundry's like, "That's a fucking plumber, bro." Get over yourself. All right, so the next issue, the X-Men are riding hot on the Blackbird to get to where to Mur Island. They're spitting close. Colossus leaps out of the Blackbird into the research facility. Aurora takes Wolverine, and a Nightcrawler teleports in. Meanwhile, Banshee and Cyclops land the Blackbird and walk in like normal, not crazy people. Nightcrawler's found Lorna. She's unconscious, and there's like a crazy mummified looking guy that Cyclops recognizes as whatever this guy's name is, because he's the boat captain. They took the boat from like McAgnes or something crazy like that. Lorna's okay. Cyclops runs outside while Banshee takes care of Lorna and gets Storm to pick him up. And meanwhile, Nightcrawler's sneaking around the place. He almost gets zapped by Havoc, and then he's like, "Havoc, dude, bro, we're all friends here, man." And Alex is holding Jamie, who looks pretty rough, and Alex is about to attack Nightcrawler again because again they think they're dead, right, because of what happened before when Colossus grabs him from behind, and then Havoc's like, "Oh, it's Colossus. I believe you, but not that crazy devil looking guy." Racism. Anyway, Cyclops and Aurora are sneaking around as well, and they see somebody around the corner, so Aurora uses her powers to send Moira right into the arms of Cyclops, and it's like, "Oh my goodness, there you are." And then Cyclops runs and finds Jean collapsed on the ground. She's having like hallucinations about Jason Wynegard / Mastermind, and eventually everyone comes back together, and they have like a little conversation. Jamie's pretty messed up because one of his clones got attacked by Proteus, and we learned that Proteus / Mutant X, his ability, he has like no shell form, so he has to like continually possess different groups of people to like get around and do things. He also has reality shifting powers that we find out about, and then this is where we learn that he is the son of Moira McTaggart, and that Jamie's, because he lost one of his clones, even though it caused him a lot of problems, he that saved Lorna's life because Proteus possessed them instead of Lorna. Cyclops and Wolverine get into another big fight, and Cyclops was like, "Chill it out, man. Jamie's pretty tough. In fact, he defeat the entire Fantastic Four by himself, so calm down." And then Wolverine's like, "Ooh, I don't like finding out more information before we fight this guy. I'm going to pout about it and then cut this table with my claws." All right, bro. What would Mariko think of you at this point? Anyway, so yeah, we find out Moira's son, and then we head off to Jamie's clone, who is being possessed by a Proteus, and he's like, "Oh, I'm eating this shell like way too fast." And he runs into Jason Wynegard, but he's not able to possess him because he's like so weak at this point, and Jason's got a lot of like mental fortitude, right, because that's part of his powers. But there's some douchebag bro who he's able to possess instead and take him for a ride. Meanwhile, the X-Men are all gathered together, except, well, Jamie's not an X-Men, but Jamie Maddock, he's back monitoring police radios and all that, and the X-Men split up to all go different ways to try to track this guy down because he could be anywhere. Moira and Cyclops have a conversation in the car about when she gave birth, and that, she hated the father of the child, but she loved her son. And then when he started having all these crazy powers, right, when he's like an early teenager, some of this stuff manifests, that the only thing she could do was imprison him in metal, because he has two weaknesses. The first is metal, and the second is he always needs like a host to get around. Meanwhile, Jean is flying around, and Wynegard sees her, and he causes her to have like a hallucination again. They're like on horses chasing after like a deer. They eventually find a bunch of dogs that have tracked down the deer. Jason like whips them away and hands a knife to Jean, who's gonna stab a guy dressed up like a deer, and she's like, "Who? Why would I do that?" And then she like comes to reality, and she sees the corpse of the guy that was possessed last by Proteus. Meanwhile, Nightcrawler and Wolverine are wandering around, and Wolverine sees a police officer but doesn't smell him like a police officer, and he has a lot of issues. He's like, "Wait a second." And then the police officer is possessed by Proteus, and so he tries to possess Wolverine, but Wolverine obviously has metal, so and so it pushes him back out, and the guy's like, "Oh fuck." And then Wolverine's going to go claw him up real good, and Nightcrawler's driving in, and then this is where we see that Proteus has like reality contortion powers. He can like manipulate reality, and we see all these crazy like 70s acid trip images of Wolverine and Nightcrawler being like twisted and turned and all that stuff. And Aurora comes and shoots lightning at the guy. but then he causes like a hill to arise and knock her down. She blows up his getaway car and like burns his face. And then he's like walking very slowly up to her to like possess her because he can't possess Wolverine, and Nightcrawler looks like a demon. So Aurora, he's using all the power she has left after being knocked out to blast him with wind. And Nightcrawler and Wolverine can't do anything because it's like hurricane levels of wind. And like Proteus is slowly walking closer and closer and closer. And that's the end of the A story for this issue. The B story is kind of weird, as they tend to be. It just takes place in this crazy like 70s mind trip of a situation before Storm gets there, when Wolverine, and this is like after some of the my reality alteration stuff has happened, Wolverine and Nightcrawler. Wolverine's like, I'm gonna get you, and the guy's like, well, I'm just gonna keep messing with you, and Nightcrawler's like, no, you can't. And then it's just different crazy like Wolverine's like broken glass, he's turned into like a spider, he's like melting from the inside, he's like turned into like a block man, he's like cutting himself up, and finally gets like a claw slash on the guy, and the guy's like, I didn't do anything, that's all you could do, it's nothing. And Wolverine's like, it proved to me that I was courageous. And that's it. Storm is pushing. She tries to fly away, and Proteus is just beating the shit out of her. Then bang! There's a gunshot, and Proteus is like, ruh-roh, that's metal, that'll hurt. There's a couple more shots, and then we see it's Moira, and she is an incredibly bad shot despite having a scope with a sniper rifle. She's going for the final blow when Cyclops stops her, saying that the X-Men don't kill, we capture. And she hits him real hard with the gun, like twice, knocking him down. Proteus is like, fuck, I gotta go. So he hops in his little Jeep and drives off. Moira makes sure Cyclops isn't dead, and then grabs the other Jeep and follows after. Later on, Jean comes, shows up with Banshee and Colossus and everyone else, and they get everybody kind of patched up and healed. Cyclops recognizes that everyone's having like a real psychological problem, so then he instigates a fight by calling Wolverine a little bitch, and then pushing Nightcrawler, and he ends up getting into a fight with Cyclops, Nightcrawler. No, Cyclops gets in a fight with Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and Storm, because they're the ones who are the most psychologically affected by Proteus's like world-bending powers. And at some point, he finally calls it quits. And then Jean reveals that the plan all along was to make sure everyone, even though they were all physically fine, that their mental health was well, that they were still able to fight and still able to push and do what they needed to do. And then Wolverine's like, you know what? I've hated you motherfuckers. I hated you so much. But you know what? That was pretty good. You're a good leader. I was wrong. I was like, thanks, bro. And they got to figure out what to do next. Meanwhile, Proteus is driving around a police car, stops and possesses this young woman, and throws the police body into like the swamp, and heads into Edinburgh looking for the man I hate. Moira is going to see that man, and that ends up being her dun 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 husband, something McTaggart. I don't remember. Anyway, so they go back and forth. She left him like 20 years ago after he like beat the shit out of her, and she reveals that she was pregnant, and he's like, oh, I got a son, and she's like, don't you dare, and she pulls out a gun and is like, oh, Joe's his name, and is like, go fuck yourself, just I wanted to warn you that he's coming to kill you. And he's like, whatever. And as she's walking off, Proteus shows up and sneaks in there and possesses his father, and then Jean is like, oh, my head, I found him. And so they all kind of go flying outwards. Moira's sitting in the car trying to figure out what to do when the whole place like bursts open, and there's the possessed father, and she tries to shoot him, but he turns the gun into a snake, and then she starts running away. Meanwhile, the X-Men are coming close. First of all, Colossus, since he's made of metal, he dives down to interrupt, and then the rest of the X-Men follow. The guy starts transforming the world around him, sending gravity sideways and all this stuff, and right before the X-Men are about to do anything, Proteus grabs his mom, Moira, and threatens to break her neck if the X-Men do anything. These B-plots from the classic X-Men continue to be bizarre. So we start off with this like crazy thing where the Lorna and Havoc are in the smashed up car, and they're about to kiss, and then he like drove off the road because he keeps having these like weird like out of mind experiences, and Lorna's chastising him, and he's talking about how he just, he's trying to figure out what's going on, and then it like happens again, and she dies in his like dream, and then she's like, hey, you gotta chill the fuck out. And he's like, I can't help it, I don't want to be an X-Man, I want to just like have kids and a family and be happy, and I don't want this to all end in tears. And that's when they see the storm that the storm that Storm created in the previous issue. And they go running, they hear the gunshots, and he starts to, like, to drift, is what he calls it. Lucian, he's like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm an X-Men. I'm not afraid. And then they get to, like, the scene, and Havoc walks up to Wolverine, and he sees this, like, crazy-looking Wolverine's eyes, and he's like, oh, my gosh. I don't want to do that. I'm no X-Men. It's, like, all over the place. And that's that. Oh, man. Proteus is having a good time. So we spend the first part of this issue, him just going crazy, the X-Men saving people, like Storm blows off some bees, Wolverine saves an old woman, Lorna saves him. It's just a big battle. And then Proteus kind of recalls what happened with, like, Magneto when he was in Moira Island and he attacked the X-Men, and how he got released, and how he had a body, but it was starting to fade away, and that, like, Moira had constructed some sort of device that was keeping his body structure there so that he could survive even without continually stealing other host bodies. But at some point, because of the battle with Magneto, that was slowly fading away, and that's when the angry sailor came by, and he was able to take it. Moira found the body discarded, and the guy tried to ambush Jean, but her power is so strong she was able to fend him off, and that's when he possessed Jamie, and yada yada brought us here. Then back in the present, Proteus morphs Moira a couple times, and then everyone else is like, wait a second, everything's back to normal. So then they gather themselves and charge forward, and Cyclops has got a plan. So it starts with the idea is that they're going to get him to a place where he can't possess any more bodies, and then they're going to totally burn him out of this body. So it starts with Aurora, who kind of attacks them, and then she gets turned into, like, Amber. Wolverine rescues her. And then Banshee takes a couple shots at the guy, and Cyclops is like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm shooting this guy with the gun. Like, you kidding me? Oh my gosh. Proteus is like, well, you should have killed me. And then he opens up a hole in the ground. Cyclops bursts it open. Nightcrawler goes in and pulls them both out before they get trapped again, but they're knocked out. Lorna has to save them at the last minute. Meanwhile, the rest of the X-Men head out. Jean, as the Phoenix, attacks and pummels this guy with a lot of powers, but then he's able to, like, make her feel like she's dead and buried. At that point, Wolverine jumps in, stabs him real good, grabs Moira, and runs off. Cyclops and Havoc then double team him. He's able to escape once again and chase after Wolverine and Moira. He's able to grab Moira, knocking Wolverine to the ground. Cyclops uses the optic blast to kind of, like, get him down slowly, and Colossus climbs up to Castle Edinburgh to help fight the guy and to finish the battle once and for all. Once up there, the guy's body is clearly tapped out, and he's like, I'm going to possess you now, Moira. But Colossus gets there just in time to throw the husk with Proteus in it against the wall, which shatters the body, releasing the energy form of Proteus. At this point, this is all part of the plan that Cyclops came up with, so Colossus has to resist a little bit longer. So Proteus is attacking his mind and the reality and everything, and taunting him, and he gets close enough to where Colossus can transform into Colossus from Peter, like his metal form, and then he smashes the guy right in his heart. And because his weakness is like metal, and Colossus is all metal at this point, it short circuits the whole system and causes like a kind of like a psychic, kind of like crazy explosion. Everyone down at the bottom of the castle, Jean, Cyclops, Havoc, and Wolverine see it, and Jean's able to carry them up top, where they find Colossus hugging Moira while she's, like, crying it out. And goes back to a lot of this could have been avoided. Cyclops had just let Moira shoot him with a sniper rifle instead of dragging it out here and then killing him anyway. But whatever, here we are. Same thing with Banshee earlier. He could have just shot him in the chest and killed him, but we needed Colossus to be a murderer, so I guess that's what we're doing. Meanwhile, Banshee and Aurora show up, and Banshee runs up and kisses and hugs Moira, and it's like, oh, now this is the true victory is the healing from all this damaging stuff that has occurred. The B-plots centers around Emma Frost and Jason Weingart. He is at the Hellfire Club thinking about stuff and looking at how Slutty, the servant girl, is looking, calls her a trollop in his mind. And he's very angry. Meanwhile, the girl is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's sexism in this club and yada yada. And she wanders into like a changing room where Emma's like changing, and she's like, how do you do it? How do we blah blah blah? It's so sexist. I can't stand it. Why don't we protest? And then Emma Frost is like, what do you take me for? I am the White Queen, you dumb bitch. Like, I wear this outfit to cheapen men. It doesn't cheat me at all because I have the power. You don't even understand what sexism is. I use it as, this is my battle outfit. And then she throws her cape on. It is like, what does she say? There is no such thing as sexism unless you give them that power. It's great, great stuff. And then the woman's like, how do you do it? It's such an awful place. This place is terrible. And she's like, you idiot. That's why it's called the Hellfire Club, you dumb bitch. Then she goes in, and her and Jason have like some bizarre chess match in their minds. And then at the end, it's like a draw. It's like really bizarre. Man. Anyway. With Proteus defeated, we continue with some more side content until we get into the actual Dark Phoenix stuff. And we start with a couple of Marvel team-ups, which are just Spider-Man books where he teams up with random people since it doesn't have a team. This one starts off with Nightcrawler picking up his girlfriend Amanda from the airport. She's a flight attendant and such. So he's grabbing her, so our microphone is kind of pushed away. They get all smoochy, and the Nightcrawler recognizes Arcade. And he's like, oh, I gotta go check that out. Or Arcade's playing. So he goes over and he recalls like the events from the previous Murder World arc. And then he comes back. And we find out that this guy was trying to hire Arcade, but he was doing like a pretty crap job. Arcade recognizes the scent of Nightcrawler being in his plane. This guy, he's like, well, if Arcade can't do it or won't do it, then I'll just hire somebody else. And they're like, whatever, go fuck yourself. So then Nightcrawler and Amanda hide in the trunk of this guy's like limo or whatever so that they can get driven to the circus. And in the circus, the plan is that an assassin's going to kill Spider-Man or something. So Nightcrawler pretends to be Spider-Man because they both have blue and red uniforms and people can't tell the difference. And so this just so happens that Peter Parker's there as well. And so Nightcrawler gets saved by Spider-Man before he gets shot. And then so there's an assassin in the wings. People start freaking out. Spider-Man and Nightcrawler are bouncing around. Eventually, they find Cutthroat. Cutthroat is the hired assassin. They start battling with him. He releases some animals like a tiger, or tigers and an elephant. Spider-Man's able to defeat them. Nightcrawler corners him again, starts beating him up, gets almost shot, and then Spider-Man comes and finishes him off by just decking the shit out of him. And then his like special magic gun jams and explodes. They then tie him up and leave him on Jardine's car, or in Jardine's car. Meanwhile, Jardine, or the fat guy who hired Arcade's like, no, I'm good, has kidnapped Amanda. So Nightcrawler and Spider-Man are able to confront him and get him to not shoot him, and then they knock his ass out, and that wraps up the first one. Our next Marvel team-up adventure is with the Beast. So the Beast is getting loved on by a bunch of 70s chicas at the whatever university they're at. And Spider-Man's walking in with his girl at the moment, which is some blonde chick I don't recognize. And then we meet our two bad guys. There's like Yellow Skeleton Man, and then there's the Striker or whatever. It's a weirdo. But we learned that these guys were doing like experiments, and this one guy lost like his everything but like his metal bones in this experiment, and that they're trying to get a device to like bring him back or to give him something or whatever. Anyway, Spider-Man detects some weirdness is going on, and so this skeleton man goes to steal something that's going to like help them, and Shrike, I think is his name, like this bird bad guy or whatever, attacks Spider-Man, and then that's what arouses Beast, and then Beast and Spider-Man team up to start fighting these guys, and they get turned up and bounce out. Peter Parker is hanging out with his girl, and they're chit-chatting about that, and they realize that these people, the bad guys, need like a huge power source to be able to activate this thing and do what they need to do. And so they're going to go to like some broadcast area to like utilize their energy from like the antenna, and they somehow have a helicopter. So they fly up there, and Beast sees it, and he's like, man, I need to go find Spider-Man so we can take care of this. And Spider-Man's like, yo, I'm here. So the bad guys start utilizing the energy from the broadcast tower, and Spider-Man and heads up there and starts fighting. The Skeleton Man's like getting bigger and bigger, and Wolverine, Beast and Spider-Man are fighting, and they were just about to beat Shrike when the big guy, who's like going crazy now, the Skeleton Man, he's like, blah, 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 and then Shrike's like, what about me? And then the Skeleton Man's like, go fuck yourself, and then Spider-Man saves him, and then the two of them, Beast and Spider-Man, they grab Shrike, and he has some sort of like shock ray or something that he uses, and they use it on the big guy, the big Skeleton Man, and it like zaps him real good so that he like dissolves into a pile of skeleton or like bones. And at that point, Shrike flies off, and Beast is like, hey, wait a second, let's get him. And Spider-Man's like, nah, I killed a man today, I'm just gonna go be sad about it. Uh, Continuing forth, the X-Men are saying goodbye to Sean. He doesn't have powers, and he doesn't want to trouble the X-Men anymore, so he's staying with Moira. The X-Men also say goodbye to Jamie Maddock, leave an open invitation to him, and along with Lorna and Alex, who want to stay behind and just live normal lives, just be normal men. On the way back, we switch over to Jason Weingard, who's flying the Hellfire Club plane behind the Blackwing, and while he's doing that, he's tormenting Jean Grey, making her feel like she's on a ship with him and that they're in love. And then she comes to, and she's having various feelings, but Cyclops reassures her by making out with her. As they arrive, they get an alarm that there's an intruder at the X Mansion. Oh no, who could it be? It's Charles, he's back. That was fast. And immediately, several weeks go by, several days, and Jean and Cyclops are out wandering around in the fall, enjoying themselves when they come back in, and Wolverine storms out of the danger room and is like, fuck that guy. Cyclops then goes up and tries to reason with Professor X, telling him that these are not kids. You can't just give them, he wants to give demerits to Wolverine. And that there's a different way to treat them, and that, you got to use a different strategy to build them as a team. And Xavier's been a real asshole and telling him he was a bad leader and that he needs to do better. Anyway, Cerebro goes off, and you find two unknown X-Men, or two unknown mutants, one in New York and one in Chicago. So they split the team and go visit. And as we slowly learn, you never split the team. Meanwhile, the Hellfire Club, we find out that douchebag, Warhawk, who came into their home and was doing shit, he was sent here by the Hellfire Club, and that he spliced into this Cerebro, so the Hellfire Club gets access to all the Cerebro information as well. And so Black King Shaw sends Emma Frost to go pick up the X-Men in Chicago and figure out what's going on. Back in Chicago, for the first time we go to Chicago, and here we meet the lovable, excellent character, Kitty Pryde. And she's just like a 13-year-old Jewish teenager in Chicago, and she's got normal issues. She's coming back from dance. She's got a headache. And the reason I say Jewish is because it becomes a very important part of her character. Right now it's not broached, but later on it becomes very important. She comes home from dance. She's got a headache. Her parents are talking to Emma Frost, who's pretending to be like a school teacher. She is like a school teacher. She runs a school in Massachusetts. The Hellions come from there, but right now she's talking about bringing Kitty to her school. Emma walks past Xavier, Colossus, Aurora, and Wolverine, who are coming up to talk to Kitty's parents as well. And while Xavier is talking to the parents, Aurora, Wolverine, and Colossus take Kitty out to get ice cream and talk about how they're X-Men and how she's a mutant too, and how they can all be friends and stuff. And right about that time, the Hellfire Club sends in their crazy machine men who all have specific strengths versus a particular X-Men. So once the X-Men realize that, they turn it around and they're able to beat the shit out of them. During this fracas, Kitty Pryde gets knocked out, or she leaps back and goes right through the wall, because that's her power, is that she can go through stuff. She can become intangible, which is good because Emma Frost comes in and telepathic stuns them all and drags them off and flies away. And the minions are like, what about the other mutant? And she's like, she's a kid. We'll come back and get her later. But dun dun dun, Kitty snuck up on board. And that leads us right into the B-plot, the classic X-Men B-plot, which is bizarre, as a lot of these are. But it pretty much starts with Kitty in the alleyway after she fell out of the thing. And then she has some sort of she clearly landed on LSD, because she's having some crazy lunatic dream with Emma Frost and these green men and this other white men in a book. And then at some point Aurora shows up and they team up to help each other and to defeat Emma and yada yada yada. And eventually she wakes up from her ridiculous nonsense and she's like, I have a mutant, I have powers, I can go through shit. And that's when she sees the X-Men being carted onto the ship, and when she climbs on board. So goes ahead and explains something that does not need to be explained. But there you go. And it was very weird. Oh, man. Next up, Uncanny X-Men 130, we get to meet another of the excellent X-Men that are starting to come on board as we progress further. We are with Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Jean as they just drove the car into the city for New York to find out where this person is. And they stumble upon a disco fun. And while they're in there, we get a lot of back and forth with Jason and Shaw back at Hellfire Club, and we learn that from Emma that the X-Men have been captured. And then Shaw's questioning Jason whether he can or cannot control Jean Grey, and he's like, of course I can, I'm going to take care of business. We switch over to Emma. She's showing they got Xavier, they put him on some sort of mind altering thing or mind stunning thing, and the other X-Men are just naked. in cages. And Kitty shows up and she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, Aurora, help me. And she's like, oh, they're using something against me. Then Kitty has like a flashback to the previous issue, which we're not going to talk about. Anyway, Aurora gives Kitty like a piece of paper that she had tucked in her like shirt that has a number, and then Kitty takes off, and Emma's goons see her and they run after her, but she disappears. Meanwhile, back at the disco, Jean again is assaulted mentally by Jason Weingard, the mastermind. And now she's imagining that they're getting wedding, and then they get married, and then she becomes the Black Queen, and they kiss in real life. And Cyclops is like, the fuck? And then she's like, oh, I can explain this. And he's like, how? And she's like, I can't explain this. And this is when we meet Dazzler, awesome Dazzler. She's the first X-Men to really get like a solo series. Because there was like the Beast mini solo series, but it was like a part of another book, right? Dazzler is coming up soon. She gets like a solo series. I don't think anyone else has gotten one up to this point. Anyway. So we see Dazzler, and she's got the power of light, but at this point, Nightcrawler goes out to answer the phone in the car, and it's Kitty being like, help! And Nightcrawler's like, who are you? And she's like, Aurora gave me this number and told me they were captured, and that you have to come help us, yada, yada, yada. And then this, one of the robots, the one that's supposed to fight Nightcrawler, shows up and zaps him with something that makes it so he can't teleport. And then back in the disco, Dazzler's using her like light power to put on quite the show. When two of the other robots, ones for Jean and Cyclops, bounce in, and they're about to capture them and be super successful when Dazzler's like had enough of this shit, and so she uses her light powers to blast the robot guy who was attacking Jean and takes him out essentially. So then Jean's able to free Cyclops, who's able to take care of the other two, and then the one with Nightcrawler comes down, and Jean beats the shit out of him too. And with that, Dazzler joins up with the X-Men temporarily, at least for now, and they all head out. And as they head out, there's a big explosion, because the robots, when they fail, they explode. The X-Men get in the Rolls Royce, and they're driving away trying to figure out what they should do, while Nightcrawler fills them in and all this stuff. And as they're driving away, Jason's standing there, and for a minute, we can see his shadow and see that the image she's presenting is not the actual image. And he thinks about his control over Jean Grey, and he laughs and laughs into the darkness. Oh, good stuff. The B-plot here is 1,000 times better, because it focuses on Moira and Sean back in Mirror Island. So Moira is still mourning the loss of her son and ex-husband, even though he was an asshole. And Sean's putting up with her like being a total bitch, which she admits to herself. And she just wants to be left alone, which is why she sent everyone else away. But Sean refuses. He's still trying to be there and be her man and take care of her. Anyway, she like says something to a point where he's like, I'm gonna go work out. And so he rips his shirt off, and we see his like super hot, ripped Irish body. Well, she's reading about cloning, and he's like, all right, I need to go talk to her. They can't make this. And then he tracks her down, and she's like in her lab, and she's got herself locked in there. And Sean's like, man, this dumb bitch. Anyway, so he goes to her office, and he finds like an old family book, and he's looking through pictures of her when she got a Nobel Peace Prize, when she was like dating Charles, when she was married to Joe, I think his name is. And he's like reading and thinking about it. And then at some point, he puts like two and two together, and he's like, wait a second. She's going to clone him. And that's exactly what she's doing. She's got the dead body of her son in like a chamber where it won't fade away for whatever reason, and she's gonna like clip a piece of him away, and she's like doing some experimentation, and Sean's like, oh shit, I gotta figure this out. And so he goes into like the security keypad or whatever to get inside her lab, and he's able to bust through just in time as she's like standing over like a vat that's going to start like the cloning process or whatever. And he like calls her out, and she's like, how'd you figure it out? And he's like, you can't do this, cloning something, your son, something. And she's, no, my son deserves the life he never had because he was born a child of rape and yada yada. And Sean's like, that's not going to bring your son back. Like, if he could like bring himself back to life, because apparently it's not actually a clone, it's like his reality altering powers still exist within like the frame of like his body's existence. And so somehow cutting a piece of that body off, which still contains his essence, will like resurrect him. But then Sean's like, if he wanted to be resurrected, why didn't he resurrect himself up to now? And she's like, I don't know. And then she just like tosses the thing. Well, it looks like she just like collapses, and he catches her, and then the vial like breaks. And she cries, and he gives her kisses on the face, and then they're going to like get through this together. And then they're about to head out. And Sean used a lot of like, hey, you know, maybe this one thing you messed up, but like there's so many people you've helped and people you can help, and like there's so much of your life you can still live, and you know, live for your son, and yada yada yada. And at some point she's like, you're right. So she goes and she like removes the oxygenation chamber or whatever, so her son's body will like fade away, and so he can finally like pass on and die. And then they like walk off arm in arm. So we finish up this whole somewhat Proteus arc at this juncture. It's like the Proteus / Introduction to Kitty arc. Kitty Pryde's running away from these dudes, and she trips and falls, and she's like, no! And then Phoenix shows up and beats the shit out of him. Nightcrawler grabs her, runs up the building, but, she's scared of him because he looks like a freaking demon. She doesn't know what she's doing. So she she falls through the building. Jean tracks her down and tells her she's part of the X-Men and that they're here to help. And they hug it out, and Kitty cries it out because she's fucking 12 years old. Like, been almost kidnapped like 3 times. Jean then uses her mind powers to get all the information on the Hellfire Club, Emma Frost, everything that's going on with the guys they beat up in the car that are trying to kidnap Kitty. And then the X-Men do a Trojan horse ploy. So they tie themselves up, put themselves in the back of this car. Jean mind controls or manipulates one of the guys who came to kidnap Kitty and drives him back to the Frost compound in Chicago. Meanwhile, Kitty gets inside the compound, realizes that Storm's not here. She's actually being tortured by Emma. Sees the X-Men, and she reaches up to try to help unlock the door to get Wolverine out. And when she touches it, it breaks and opens up. And she's like, "Oh, that's weird." And we find out later that's one of her core component abilities, is that when she uses her teleportation or her phasing stuff through electronics, it destroys them. So that it's this is well written by Chris Claremont at this point, because it kind of gives you hints that there's stuff going on without being hey motherfuckers, this is what's happening. Anyways, Wolverine stumbles out and Kitty gets zapped with a stun ray, and then Wolverine's like, well, time for you to die. Meanwhile, the X-Men roll on up, and then they make a big show. Dazzler's with them, so Cyclops blows the roof off the vehicle. Dazzler does a light show, and Phoenix race, and Nightcrawler race inside the building. Meanwhile, Dazzler with her roller skates and her light powers, and Cyclops start blasting everybody and beating the shit out of everybody. Emma's like, "Go get them, stop them! I'm gonna do something about this Storm character, make them problem." And Jean shows up to stop that from happening, and she's got a very evil Dark Phoenix look. Ooh, it's happening. Meanwhile, the other X-Men, namely Cyclops, future X-Men, Dazzler, and Nightcrawler, beating the shit out of the Hellfire Club goons. They get Colossus and Kitty, or Colossus, Wolverine show up with Kitty. Professor X is recovering because they unhooked him. And then this guy shows up. He's like, "I'm gonna kill you all now." And then Colossus turns into his metal self, and it looks like he kills that soldier. He beats the shit out of him, regardless. And then he's like, "Sorry, I got a little overexcited." And we get some more of Kitty being like, "Ooh, Colossus, I want some of that D." Meanwhile, Aurora's watching Phoenix use her godlike powers to completely overwhelm Emma Frost. At first, it seemed like they were tied, according to the comic, but then Emma slowly realizes that she was just taking her measure, and now she's gonna completely massacre. And as the Phoenix starts to suck the very life force out of the White Queen, Emma Frost, according to the comic, Emma does something, and the whole building that they're in explodes. Cyclops sees this and freaks out, starts pulling everything up. And then the Phoenix rises from the ashes, of course, with her and Aurora, who are totally fine. And she's like, "Oh, you doubted me." And he's like, "What? No, I don't know." Charles rolls up in his wheelchair. It's like, "Hey, where you been?" And he's like, "I've been around. You guys did a great job." And they take Kitty back to her parents' house. Dazzler's like, "Thanks for the offer to be an X-Men, but I'm good. I'm just going to do music and all that jazz." So Nightcrawler takes her back to the airport so she can fly back to New York. Kitty's parents come out, and Cameron, her dad, is freaking out, screaming at Xavier, and the mom's crying on her knees, "What have you done with my daughter all night, blah 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 blah." And then Jean's like, "Fuck this," and changes their memory, and then they're super nice. And then Cyclops notices something's amiss because Professor X looks stunned by the sudden change in his disposition, and so then he kind of glances over at Jean and is like, "Did you do this?" And she's like, "It's fine, I don't want to waste any time," and then heads inside. And before Cyclops follows her inside, Aurora's like, "Hey, so something's going on, and I feel like you've noticed it as well." And it's like, yeah, there's a dark side to this Phoenix situation, and I'm concerned that it's consuming her. And then we get a shadowy presence of Jason Wyngarde in the background. The B story to this is, it's not as bizarre as some of these are. It's just kind of pointless as far as I'm concerned. It focuses around Dazzler, which is fun because Dazzler gets her own miniseries here, as I've mentioned before. But it's just her doing her show, being like, "Oh, I'm late," and then sketching around New York on her skates, going through places, and then she runs into some homies at an all-night diner, and they just talk about her being a superhero, not wanting to be a superhero, her responsibility, veganism, I don't know, a lot of bullshit. And that's it. That's the B story. We're going to stay online with Dazzler as we go to the final issue of this arc, which is the Amazing Spider-Man number 203, guest starring Dazzler. So it starts off, Spider-Man immediately sees Dazzler running away from something on her skates, and like a light force chasing after her, and she's dodging around that. She kind of passes out, and Spider-Man saves her, but then she has some qualms with Spider-Man because of all the stuff she's read in the newspaper. Blast you, Jonah Jameson, and blasts him, and then disappears. Later on, Spider-Man's going to see the Star Trek movie, like literally the Star Trek movie, because Marvel at this point has a advertising agreement with Paramount, I think. Because literally, when I'm reading these comics, you see all the ads for the Star Trek movie, the original Star Trek movie. And then we see Dazzler. She finally gets captured by the Light Master, who is one of Spider-Man's villains. His power is like light, and Spider-Man had like trapped him in like the realm of light or something like that, and supposedly that was the end of that. But him and Dazzler start fighting behind the movie theater where Spider-Man's watching Star Trek, coincidentally, and then the whole theater like kind of like, it doesn't explode, but like the back theater explodes, and so he's like, whoops, gotta go. And so he goes and he starts fighting the Light Master, and Light Master kind of hits him real hard, knocks him into like a water tower, and then Light Master grabs Dazzler, and they peace out to like his underground lair somewhere else in New York. And he's telling Dazzler that his powers are light, and that he needs light to be more powerful, and that because she produces light, he's going to take her power, and he's going to be the most powerful ever, and they're going to be a team. And she's like, I don't want to. And he's like, too bad. So Spider-Man shows up and ruins those plans, and the whole place gets like burned with fire and blows up, but Spider-Man protects Dazzler with his like web, his non-flammable web. But then as soon as Dazzler kind of comes to, she starts attacking Spider-Man, and they kind of go back and forth, and she chases him around, and they're fighting, and then eventually he like sneaks away, and he's like, I'm tuckered out. So he goes to sleep, and then we get like a little thing where it's like he wakes up and he's all, yeah, I'm doing good. I go to work, I go hang out with Aunt May in her wheelchair, I go teach my lectures, and then time to go find Dazzler. And he does. He finds her in like a ruined building, and she looks all scared and concerned, and she runs up and gives him a hug, and he's like, yeah, babe, what's up? And then he's like, wait a second, this is still, because he figured out it's not Dazzler, it's attacking him. When Light Master was like destroyed and sent back to the light universe or whatever, he made some connection with Dazzler, and so he's using that connection to like possess her body so that he can control her and defeat Spider-Man. So Spider-Man like knocks her out real good, takes her back to the machine. Light Master keeps trying to fight through Dazzler, but he puts her in the machine, like reverses the polarity or whatever, and then sends Light Master back to the realm of light or whatever. And then Dazzler's like, oh, thank you so much, I'm finally myself, how can I ever repay you? And then Spider-Man's like, ooh, I have some ideas, wink wink wink. Good stuff. Anyway, so that's the end of the Proteus arc, plus Kitty Pryde, plus Dazzler and all that stuff. And yeah, it was fun. I don't know why it was all combined into one thing, but I guess like whatever. I could have changed it if I wanted, but I didn't. So yeah, good stuff. The X-Men continue to become more nuanced and more exciting, and there's like the mutants keep coming, and they keep being more interesting and have more nuanced stuff. And I like having the they were like teenage adventures in the original Uncanny X-Men run of the first like 60 issues, but now we're starting to get more adult and more kind of mature stories and storylines and like a mixture of things, right? Because we have like a 12-year-old Kitty Pryde and like a 100-year-old Logan, and Kitty Pryde is excellent. Dazzler's a good character. These characters are all so good and so well written, and it's just fun. But yeah, let's go ahead and like, share, subscribe, and I will catch you guys later.